Number 10, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, this question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements? If so, why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, in the context they were given, because I do.
Does he stand by his...
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Does he stand by his answer yesterday on the rail line north of Whangarei? And apologies for the grammar, but I quote him, I think it's the opposite. I don't think there's any plans to close it, end of quotes.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I do stand by that statement. In fact, I have the exact transcript of that, but it was words to the effect of something about closing the line, and as we know, the line has not been closed.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters. Order.
Supplementary question. How does he reconcile that answer with KiwiRail's Steve Muir, manager of Bulk and Forestry's written statement just 2 weeks ago, and I quote him, we will also not be running trains north of Kauri from 1 September. End of quotes.
Mr. Speaker,
the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
So, in the interest of the last question, the exact question from the media was, are you aware of any plans to close the rail line north of Whangarei? As I just stated to the House, the rail line north of Whangarei is not closing. There have been issues in relation to the commercial contractor on that line, and the contract hasn't been renewed because the contractor is not prepared to pay commercial rates. If somebody else wants to pay commercial rates, or that party wants to come back and pay more commercial rates, then they can operate, but the line is not closing.
Supplementary question, Speaker.
Order.
Supplementary
question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Could I ask the Prime Minister, why is he engaging bull dust on this matter when everyone up there knows that if there are no trains on the line, then the railway line service is over? Why is he engaging in such obfuscation and banding of words around which mean nothing to the people of Northland?
The question's been asked. Supplement. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if I wanted to look at an expert in bull dust, all I do is look across the House. The member has a PhD in it.
Point of order, Speaker. Point of order. Point of order.
Order. Point of order.
Mr. Speaker.
Point of order. Right Honourable Winston.
Mr. Speaker, point of order. If the Prime Minister wants to engage in that sort of behaviour, which I think is unparliamentary,
Order.
I just want to remind him, the last time he tried, he got dusted up north.
Order. I think in the supplementary question, it was the question that led off to where the answer then got to. Question.
No, supplementary question.
Supplementary question.
Not getting off that easy.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
The Prime Minister, why did why did he allow the Minister of Transport on 20 October last year to give assurances that there are no railway closures planned for Northland when separate correspondence from KiwiRail on the Portland line means those assurances were categorically, deliberately false?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, because the Minister of Transport was correct.
Supplementary question, please.
Supplementary question. Right.
How could the
Honourable
Minister of Transport be telling the truth when the correspondence from KiwiRail shows that the Portland line is to be closed in favour of a metal road, and that's in the documentation?
The order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the advice I've had from the Minister of Transport is he refutes that assertion.
Speaker, point of order.
Point of order, Right Honourable.
I seek to table the correspondence from KiwiRail as to the Portland line shunting line closure, covering 3 miles.
Order.
And second, the railway line north of Kauri.
Order. I simply need now how many letters the members seeking to table KiwiRail letter and the dates of those letters.
Fortunately, 2 on 2 different matters.
And they're dated last year, I take it.
Beg your pardon?
What dates are the letters?
27 October and February of last year and February of this year.
Leave sought to table those 2 KiwiRail letters. Is there any objection to them being tabled? There is none. They can be tabled. Point of order, Sue Moroni. Order. Point of order has been called, Sue Moroni.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table the 2014-15 annual review, a transcript of the 2014-15 annual review of Kiwi Rail, where the CEO says at this stage there is no rail north of Whangarei.
I need no more assistance of that. A transcript from a select committee. It's available to all members if they so want it.
Point of order.
Speaking to the point of order.
Yes, I believe it's not available, yet publicly available, Mr Speaker.
Order. If it's been before a select committee, it's available via the e-select committee process. It's therefore available to all members if they want it. Question number 11.